Reconstruction era. This a little bit afterwards, it seems like. But we read a whole bunch of propaganda stuff that I'm not going to go through. But the three things they talk about, and I'm not going to go through. All black people are ignorant, and they had a whole bunch of people saying why they're ignorant, which is based in bullshit. All black people are lazy, dishonest, and extravagant, which is wrong again. They had a whole bunch of people saying how they are. And then number 3 was black people are responsible for bad government during Reconstruction because they're blaming black leadership as the default and the reasons why black Reconstruction failed because of black people. That's what they're saying, and that's all false. So let's get into it. Grounded in such elementary and high school teachings, an American youth attending college today would learn from current textbooks of history that the Constitution recognized slavery, that the chance for getting rid of slavery by peaceful methods was ruined by the abolitionists, that after the period of Andrew Jackson, the two sections of the United States, quote, had become fully conscious of their conflicting interests, two irreconcilable forms of civilization. The North, the democratic, in the South, a more stationary and aristocratic civilization. We would read that Harriet Beecher Stowe brought on the Civil War, that the assault on Charles Sumner was due to his, quote, corrosive invective against a South Carolina senator, and that black people were the only people to achieve emancipation with no effort on their part. The Reconstruction was a disgraceful attempt to subject white people to ignorant black rule. And that, according to the Harvard professor of history, the italics are ours, legislative expenses were grotesquely extravagant, and members of color in some states engaged in a saturnalia. I'm going to look this word up. Basically, they're saying that it's all because of black people. So this is a whole let's blame black people thing. Saturnalia. This is. Do I have it down too far? I must have it down too far. Saturnalia. A raucous, week-long ancient Roman festival honoring Saturn and the gods of agriculture and time. Okay. Of corrupt expenditures. Encyclopedia Britannica, 14th edition, volume 22, page 815 by Frederick Jackson Turner. In other words, he would in all probability complete his education without any idea of the part which the black race has played in America, of the tremendous moral problems of abolition, of the cause of and meaning of the Civil War, and the relations which Reconstruction had to democratic government and the labor movement today. Herein lies more than mere omission and differences of emphasis. The treatment of the period of Reconstruction reflects small credit upon American historians as scientists. We have too often a deliberate attempt to change the fact of history that the story will make pleasant reading for Americans. The editors of the 14th edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica asked me for an article on the history of the world of the American black person. From my manuscripts, they cut out all my references to Reconstruction. I insisted on including the following statement. White historians have ascribed the fault and failures of Reconstruction to black ignorance and corruption, but black people insisted that it was black loyalty and black voting alone that restored the South to the Union, establishing a new democracy both for white and black, and instituted the public schools. So remember, black people are the ones that really started the emphasis before the Civil War, a little bit after the Civil War, of giving free education. They had infrastructure, but it was torn down and burnt. This the editor refused to print, although he said that the article otherwise was, quote, in my judgment, and in the judgment of others in the office, an excellent one, and one which and one with which it seems to me we all may well satisfied. It's weird. It was not satisfied and refused to allow the articles to appear. War, and especially civil strife, leave terrible wounds. It is the duty of humanity to heal them, and it was therefore soon conceived as neither wise nor patriotic to speak of all the causes of strife and the terrible results to which sectional differences in the United States have led. As so, first of all, we minimize the slavery controversy which convulsed the nation from the Missouri Compromise down to the Civil War. On top of that, we passed by Reconstruction with a phase of regret or disgust. But are these reasons of courtesy and philanthropy sufficient for denying truth? If history is going to be scientific, if the record of human action is going to be set down with that accuracy and faithfulness of detail which will allow its use as a measuring rod, a guidepost for the future of nations, there must be set some standards of ethics and research and interpretations. If, on the other hand, we are going to use history for our pleasure and amusement, for inflating our national ego, and give us a false but pleasurable sense of accomplishment, then we must give up the ideal of history either as a science or as an art using the results of science, and admit frankly that we are using a version of historic facts in order to influence and educate a new generation along the way we wish. It's propaganda like this that has led men in the past to insist that history is, quote, lies agree upon, end quote, and to point out the dangers in such misinformation. It is indeed extremely doubtful if any permanent benefit comes to the world through such action. Nations reel and stagger on their way. They make hideous mistakes. They commit frightful wrongs. They do great and beautiful things. And shall we not best guide humanity by telling the truth about all this, so far as the truth is ascertainable? Here in the United States, we have a clear example. It was morally wrong and economically retrogressive to build human slavery in the United States in the 18th century. We know that now perfectly well, and there were many Americans, North and South, who knew this and said it in the 18th century. Today, in the face of new slavery established elsewhere in the world under other names and guises, we ought to emphasize this lesson of the past. Moreover, it is not well to be I'm going to make recent. Let me make sure. It's reticent. Oh my gosh, keep hitting the wrong button. I'm glad I got two of these. T-I-C-N-T. Let's find out. Reticent. Yeah, reticent. Someone who is revered, uncommunicative, or hesitant to reveal their thoughts or feelings. Reticent. Moreover, it is not well to be reticent in describing that past. Our histories tend to discuss American slavery so impartially that in the end nobody seems to have done wrong and everybody was right. Slavery appears to have been thrust upon unwilling, helpless America, while the South was blameless and becoming its center. The difference of development, North and South, is explained as a sort of working out of cosmic, social, and economic laws. One reads, for instance, Charles and Mary Beard's Rise of American Civilization with an comfortable feeling that nothing right or wrong is involved. Manufacturing and industry developed in the North. Agrarian feudalism developed in the South. They clashed as winds and waters strive, and the stronger force developed the tremendous industrial machine that governs us so magnificently and selfishly today. Yet, in this sweeping mechanistic interpretation, there is no room for the real plot of the story, for the clear mistakes and guilt of rebuilding a new slavery of the working class in the midst of a fateful experiment in democracy, for the triumph of sheer moral courage and sacrifice in the abolition crusade, and for the hunt and struggle of a degraded black millions in their fight for freedom and their attempt to enter democracy. Can all this be omitted or half suppressed in the treatises that calls itself scientific? Or, to come nearer the center and climax of this fascinating history, what was slavery in the United States? Just what did it mean to the owner and the owned? Shall we accept the conventional story that the old slave plantations and its owners fine aristocratic life of cultural leisure, or shall we note slave biographies like those of Charles Ball, Sojourn Truth, Harriet Tubman, and Frederick Douglass, the careful observation of Olmsted, and the indictment of Hinton Helper? No one can read that first thin autobiography of Frederick Douglass and have left any illusions about slavery. And if truth is our object, no amount of flowery romance and the personal remnants of its protected beneficiaries can keep the world from knowing that slavery was a cruel, dirty, costly, and inexcusable anachronism, which nearly ruined the world's greatest experiment in democracy. No serious and unbased student can be deceived by the fairy tale of a beautiful South slave civilization if those who really had opportunity to know the South before the war wrote the truth. It was a center of widespread ignorance, undeveloped resources, suppressed humanity, and unrestrained passion, with whatever veneer of manners and culture that could lie above these depths. Coming now to the Civil War, how for a moment can anyone who reads the Congressional Globe from 1850 to 1860s, the lives of contemporary statesmen and public characters, North and South, the discourse in the newspaper and accounts of meetings and speeches, no doubt that black slavery was the cause of the Civil War. What that's a question mark. What do we gain by evading this clear fact and talking in vague ways about union and states' rights and the differences in civilization as the cause of that catastrophe? Of all historic facts, there can be none clearer than that for 4 long and fearful years in the South fought to perpetuate human slavery, and that the nation which, quote, rose so bright and fair and died so pure and of stain, end quote, was one that had a perfect right to be ashamed of its birth and glad of its death. Yet one monument in North Carolina achieved the impossible by a recording of Confederate soldiers, quote, they died fighting for liberty, end quote. On the other hand, consider the North in the Civil War. Why should we be deliberately false like Woodward in, quote, meeting General Grant and represent the North as magnanimously freeing the slave without any effort on his part? The American black person are the only people in history of the world, so far as I know, that ever became free without any effort of their own. They had not started the war nor ended it. They tinged banjo around the railroad station, snag melody, I can't say the word. I'm gonna look it up. Melodious. Watch, I'll spell it out and I'll be able to say it. Melodious. Melodious, a sound that's pleasing, tuneful, or musical. So that was melodious. Where did it go? Oh yeah, there's melodious spirituals, and believing that some Yankee would soon come along and give each of them 40 acres of land and a meal. The North went to war without the slightest idea of freeing the slave. The great majority of Northerners, from Lincoln down, pledged themselves to protect slavery. They hated and harried abolition. What? They hated and harried abolition? What? To protect slavery, and they hated and harried abolitionists. Okay. But on the other hand, the thesis which Bale tends to support, that the whole North during and after the war was chiefly interested in making money, is only half true. It was abolition and belief in democracy that gained for a time the upper hand after the war had led the North in Reconstruction. Business followed abolition in order to maintain the tariff, pay the bonds, and defend the banks. To call this business a program, quote, the program of the North, and ignore abolition is unhistorical. In growing ascendancy for the calculable time was a great moral movement which turned the North from its economic defense of slavery and led it to emancipation. Abolitionists attacked slavery because it was wrong, and their moral battle cannot be truthfully minimized or forgotten. Nor does this fact deny that the majority of Northerners before the war were not abolitionists, that they attacked slavery only in order to win the war and enfranchise black people to secure this result. So they're using black people, yeah. One has but to read the debates in Congress and state papers from Abraham Lincoln down to know that the decisive action which ended the Civil War was the emancipation and arming of the black slave. That as Lincoln said, without the military help of black freemen, the war against the South could not have been won. The freemen, far from being the inert recipients of freedom at the hands of the philanthropists, furnished 200,000 soldiers in the Civil War who took part in nearly 200 battles and skirmishes, and in addition perhaps 300,000 others as effective laborers and helpers. In proportion to the population, more black people than whites fought in the Civil War. These people withdraw from the support of the Confederacy with threat of the withdrawal of millions more, made the opposition of the slaveholders useless, unless they themselves freed and armed their own slaves. This was exactly what they started to do. They were only restrained by realizing that such action removed the very cause of which they began fighting. Yet one would search current American histories almost in vain to find a clear statement or even faint recognition of these perfectly well authenticated facts. All this is but preliminary to the kernel for the historic problems with which this book deals, and that is Reconstruction. The chorus of agreement concerning the attempt to reconstruct and organize the South after the Civil War and emancipation was overwhelming. There is scarce a child in the street that cannot tell you that the whole effort was a hideous mistake and an unfortunate incident based on ignorance, revenge, and the perverse determination to attempt the impossible. That the history of the United States from 1866 to 1876 is something of which the nation ought to be ashamed, and which did more to slow down and set back black Americans than anything that has happened to him, while at the same time it's grievously and wantonly wounded again at part of the nation already hurt to death. True it is that the North Northern historians writing just after the war had scant sympathies for the South and wrote ruthlessly of rebels and slave drivers. They had at least the excuse of a war psychosis. As a young labor leader, William Henberg writes, "The great traditions of this period, and especially of Reconstruction, are shamelessly repudiated by the official hairs of Stevens and Sumner. In the last quarter of a century, hardly a single book was appeared consistently championing or sympathetically interpreting the great ideals of the crusade against slavery, whereas scores of hundreds have dropped from the press in ignoble extenuation of the North, in open apology for the Confederacy, and a measureless abuse of a radical figures of Reconstruction. The Reconstruction period, as a logical culmination is of decades of previous development, was born and burnt of the reaction. First of all, we have James Ford Rhodes, History of the United States. Rhodes was trained not as a historian, but as an Ohio businessman. He had no broad formal education. When he had accumulated a fortune, he surrounded himself with a retuned, oh my gosh, they're using some words and I can't, Jesus. Okay, I'm gonna look at this word. Oh my gosh, so much hair. Wait.
Will you be okay spelling it whenever you're done so I can put it on my notes too?
Yeah. It's R-E-T-I-N-U-E.
R-E-T.
Retinue.
Oh, retinue, okay.
Yeah, a group of assistants, servants, and followers who accompany an important or high-ranking person. Clerks. Okay. Then proceeded to manufacture a history of the United States by mass production. His method was simple. He gathered a vast number of authorities. He selected from these authorities those whose testimony supported his thesis, and he discarded the others. In a majority report of the great Triple K investigation, for instance, he laid aside in favor in the minority report, simply because the latter supported his sincere beliefs. And the report and testimony of the Reconstruction Committee of 15, he had practically. Am I muting?
Oh, I apologize.
It's okay. He did practically the same thing. Above all, he begins his inquiry convinced, without admitting any necessity of investigation, that black people are as inferior race. And here's what he says: no large policy in our country has ever been so conspicuous a failure as that of forcing universal black suffrage upon the South. Black people who simply acted out their nature were not to blame. How indeed could they acquire political honesty? What idea could barbarism thrust into slavery obtain the rights of property? For the Republican policy came no real good to black people. Most of them developed no political capacity, and a few who raised themselves above the mass did not reach a high order of intelligence because they kept it from them. They kept all this from them. Rhodes was primarily a historian of property, of economic history, and labor movement. He knew nothing of democratic government. He was contemptuous. He was trained to make profit. He used his profit to write history. He speaks again and again of the rulership of intelligence and property. He makes a plea that intelligent use of the ballot for the benefit of property is the only real foundation of democracy. The real frontal attack of Reconstruction is interpreted by the leaders of national thought in 1870 and for some time after, came from the universities, and particularly from Columbia and Johns Hopkins. The movement began in Columbia University And with the advent of John W. Burgess of Tennessee and William A. Dunning of New Jersey as professors of political science and history. Burgess was an ex-Confederate soldier who started to a little southern college with a box of books, a box of tallow candles, and a black person. And his attitude towards the black race is after years his subtle colored by his earlier conception of black people as essentially property like books and candles. Dunning was kindly and impressive professor who was deeply influenced by a growing group of young Southern students and began with them to rewrite the history of the nation from 1860 to 1880 in more or less conscious opposition to the classical interpretation of New England. Burgess was frank and determined, and his anti-black thought. He expounded this theory of Nordic supremacy, which colored all his political theories. I think this is him again. I claim that the claim that there is nothing in the color of the skin from the point of view of political ethics as is a great sophism. Sophism, I think, we'll look it up anyways. But it's basically nothing really exists. Do I exist? Do these things exist? Sophism.
Sophism.
Yes, a descriptive or false argument that usually faulty reasoning or sound logic and convincing.
Just a real quick commentary about information about what you just read about what was his name again? Burgess what?
Yeah, Burgess. Burgess.
Okay. Yeah. So those talking points that were coming out of his mouth, those come from a French, another white supremacist French writer, Arthur de Gobineau. Okay, because notice how he earlier said that the success of the black community was going to depend on their intellect and not based on what they do. Just so you know, Arthur de Gobineau, that ideology, because what he's saying comes from an essay called the Inequality of the Human Races, and with that essay was pretty much a very proto version of Nazism. And also, you also start to notice there, he prioritizes. He makes it seem that intellect is the only thing that's going to make any kind of change in their community. Notice how that kind of thought also transcends with capitalist way of thinking. The only thing that matters is, the intellectual property and fuck all of the material labor that happens behind it. Mm-hmm. Just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you. A black skin means membership in a race of men, which has never of itself succeeded in subjecting passion to reason, has never therefore created any civilization of any kind. To put such a race of men in possession of a state government and a system of federal government is to trust them with the development of political and legal civilization upon the most important subjects of human life, and to do this in communities with a large white population is simply to establish barbarism and power over civilization, which is bullshit again. Burgess is a Troy, an open apostle of reaction. He tells us that the nation now believes, quote, that it is the white man's mission, his duty and his right to hold the reins of political power in his own hands for the civilization of the world and the welfare of mankind. For this reason, America is following, quote, in Europe, the European idea of the duty of civilized races to impose their political sovereignty upon civilized or half civilized or not fully civilized races where anywhere and everywhere in the world. His complacently believes that, quote, there is something natural in the subordination of an inferior race to the superior race, even to the point of the enslavement of the inferior race. But there is nothing natural in the opposite, end quote. He therefore denominates Reconstruction as a rule, quote, of the uncivilized black person over the whites of the South. End quote. This has been the teaching of one of the greatest universities for nearly 50 years. Dunning was less dogmatic as a writer, and his own statements are often judicious. But even Dunning had declared that, quote, all the forces in the South that made for civilization were dominated by the mass of barbarous freemen, end quote. And that, quote, the antithesis and the, I go and say antipathy, antipathy, I can never say that damn word right.
Antipathy.
Yeah, antipathy of the race and color were crucial and oh my gosh, another word. See this. He's killing me with words today for some reason. Here it is. It's an easy word, I just can't say it.
Ineradicable.
Ineradicable. Okay, ineradicable. The work of most of the students whom he taught and encouraged has been one-sided and partisan to the last degree. Johns Hopkins University has issued a series of studies similar to Columbia's Southern teachers have been welcome to many northern universities. Here, often black students have been systematically discouraged, and thus a nationwide university attitude has risen by which propaganda against black people has been carried on unquestioned. The Columbian School of Historians. Why do people keep trying? No, don't. The Columbian School of Historians and social investigators have issued between 1895 and the present time 16 studies of Reconstruction in these southern states, all based on the same thesis and all done according to the same method. First, endless sympathies with the white South. Second, ridicule, contempt for silence for black people. Third, a judicial attitude towards the North, which concludes that the North, under great misapprehension, did a grievous wrong, but eventually saw its mistake and retreated. These studies vary, of course, in their methods. Dunn's own work is usually silent so far as black people is concerned. Burgess is more than fair in law but reactionary in matters of race and property, regarding the treatment of black people as a man as nothing less than a crime, and admit that, quote, the mainstay of property is the courts, end quote. The books on Reconstruction written by graduates of these universities and others, the studies of Texas, South Carolina, Florida, Virginia, and Louisiana, are thoroughly bad, giving no complete picture of what happened during Reconstruction, written for the most part by men and women without broad historical and social backgrounds, and all designed to seek the truth but to prove the thesis. Hamilton reaches the climax of this school when he characterizes the black codes, which even Burgess condemned as, quote, not only on the whole reasonable, temperate, and kindly, but in the main necessary. So the black codes were necessary. Thompson, Georgia, is another case in point. It seeks to be fair, but silly stories about black peoples indicating utter lack of even common sense are included in very noble sentiment from white people. When two black workers, William and Jim, put a straightforward advertisement in a local paper, the author says that it was, quote, evidently written by a white friend, end quote. There is not the slightest historical evidence to prove this, and there were plenty of educated black people in Augusta at the time who might have written this. Lowndes, Louisiana, put Sheridan's words in Sherman's mouth to prove a petty point. There are certain of these studies which, though influenced by the same general attitude, nevertheless have more a scientific poise and culture background. Gardner's Reconstruction in Mississippi, quote unquote, conceives black people as an integral part of the scene and treats him as a human being. With this should be bracketed the recent study of, quote, Reconstruction in South Carolina by Simpkins and Woody. This is not as fair as Gardner, but in the midst of conventional judgments and conclusions, the reproduction of all available caricatures of black people, it does not hesitate to give a fair account of black people and some of their work. It gives an impression of combining in one book. Oh my gosh, I have so much hair. One book to an antagonistic point of view, but in the clash much truth emerges. Feckelson, Louisiana, quote unquote, and others of Fleming are anti-black in spirit, but nevertheless they have a certain fairness and sense of historic honesty. Fleming's documentary history of Reconstruction is done by a man who has a thesis to support, and his selection of documents support these theses. His study of Alabama is pure propaganda. Next comes a number of books which are openly and blatantly propaganda, like Hebert's Solid South, and a book by Pike and Reynolds on South Carolina, the work by Pollard and Carpenter, and especially those of Ulrich Phillips. One of the latest and most popular of the series is, quote, The Tragic Era by Claude Bowers, which is an excellent and readable piece of current newspaper reporting, absolutely devoid of historical judgment or sociological knowledge. It is a classic example of historical propaganda of the cheaper sort. We have books like Milton's Age and Hate and Winston's Andrew Johnson, which attempt to rewrite the character of Andrew Johnson. They certainly add to our knowledge of the man and our sympathies for his weaknesses, but they cannot, for students, change the claim testimony of unshaken historical facts. Faust, Karl Schwartz, paints the picture of this fine liberal, and yet goes out of its way to show that he is quite wrong in what he said he saw in the South. The chief witness in Reconstruction, the emancipated slave himself, has been almost barred from court. His written Reconstruction record has been largely destroyed and nearly always neglected. All three or four states have preserved the debates in Reconstruction Convention. There are few biographies of black leaders. The black person is refused of hearing because he was poor and ignorant, and is therefore assumed that all black people in Reconstruction were ignorant and silly, and that therefore a history of Reconstruction in any state can quite ignore him. The result is that most unfair caricatures of black people have been carefully preserved, but serious speeches, successful administration, and upright character are almost universally ignored and forgotten. Wherever a black person's head arises to his historic view, it is promptly slain by an adjective shrewd, notorious cunning, or pilloried by a sneer, or put out of view by some quite unproven charge of bad moral character. So they basically diminished them. In other words, every effort has been made to treat black people's part in Reconstruction with silence and contempt. When recently a student tried to write on education in Florida, he found that the official records of the excellent administration of people of color superintendent of education Gibbs, a person of color, who virtually established the Florida public schools, had been destroyed. Alabama has tried to obliterate all printed record of Reconstruction. Especially noticeable is the fact that little attempt has been made to trace carefully the rise of economic development of the poor whites and their relations to the planters and to black labor. After the war, there were 5 million or more non-slaveholding whites in the South in 1860 and less than 2 million in the families of all slaveholders. Yet one might almost gather from contemporary history that the 5 million left no history and had no descendants. The extraordinary history of the rise and triumph of the poor whites has been largely neglected even by Southerners, white students. The whole development of Reconstruction was primarily an economic development, but no economic history or proper material for it has been written. It has been regarded as a purely political matter and of politics most naturally divorced from industry. All this is reflected in the textbooks of the day and in the encyclopedias until we have got to the place where we cannot use our experience during and after the Civil War for the uplift and enlightenment of mankind. We have spoiled and misconceived the position of the historians. If we are going in the future, not simply with regard to this one question, but with regard to all social programs, to be able to use human experience for the guidance of mankind, we have got clearly to distinguish between fact and desire. In fact, in the first place, somebody in each era must make clear the fact with utter disregards to his own wish and desires and beliefs. What we have got to know, so far as possible, are the things that actually happen in the world. Then, with that much clear and open to every reader, the philosopher and prophet has a chance to interpret these facts, but the historian has no right posing as scientist to conceal or distort facts until we distinguish between these two functions and the chronicler of human action. We are going to render it easy for a muddled world out of sheer ignorance to make the same mistake 10 times over. One is astonished in the study of history at the recurrence of the idea that evil must be forgotten, distorted, skimmed over. We must not remember that Daniel Webster got drunk, but only remember that he was a splendid constitutional lawyer. We must forget that George Washington was a slave owner, or that Thomas Jefferson had biracial children, or that Alexandria Hamilton had black blood, and simply remember that these were regarded as credible and inspiring. The difficulty, of course, with this philosophy is that history loses its value as an incentive, an example. It paints perfect men and noble nations, but it does not tell the truth. No one reading the history of the United States during 1850 and 1860s can have the slightest doubt left in his mind that black slaves was the cause of the Civil War. And yet during and since we learn that the great nation murdered thousands and destroyed millions on account of abstract doctrines concerning the nature of the federal union, since the attitude of the nation concerning states' rights has been revolutionized by the development of the central government since the war, the whole argument becomes an astonishing reductio and absurdum, ad absurdum, leaving us apparently with no cause for the Civil War except the recent reiteration of statements which make the great public men on one side narrow, hypocritical fanatics, and liars, while the leaders of the other side were extraordinary and unexampled for their beauty, unselfishness, and fairness. Not a single great leader of the nation during the Civil War and Reconstruction has escaped attack and libel. What does that mean? Attack and libel. Interesting word. L-I-B-E-L. I'm like, come on.
It's liable. Just saying.
Liable? Okay, cool. The magnificent. Thank you. The magnificent features of Charles Sumner and Thaddeus Stevens have been besmirched, almost beyond recognition. We have been congealing and flattering the South and slurring the North because the South is determined to rewrite the history of slavery and the North is not interested in history but in wealth. This then is the book basis upon which today we judge Reconstruction. In order to paint the South as a martyr to inescapable fate, we make the North the magnanimous emancipator, and to ridicule black people as the impossible joke in the whole development. We have in 50 years, by liable innuendo and silence so completely misstated and obliterated the history of black people in America and his relations to its work and government that today is almost unknown. This may be fine romance, but it is not science. It may be inspiring, but it is certainly not the truth. And beyond this it is dangerous. It is not only part foundation of our present lawlessness and loss of democratic ideals, it has more than that led the world to embrace and worship the color bar as social salvation. And it is helpful to range mankind in ranks of mutual hatred and contempt at the summons of a cheap and false myth. Nearly all recent books on reconstructions agree with each other in discarding the government reports of substituting select diaries, letters, and gossips. Yet it happens that the government records are at historic source of wide and unrivaled authenticity. Unrivaled. There we go. I said it right. There is a report of the Select Committee of 15, which developed painstakingly into the situation all over the South and called all kinds of conditions of men to testify. There are the reports of Carl Schartz, the 12 volumes of report made on the Triple K conspiracy, and above all, the Congressional Globe. None who has not read page by page the Congressional Globe, especially the sessions of the 39th Congress, can possibly have any idea of what the problem of Reconstruction faced in the United States, where in 1865 to 1866, then there were the reports of the Freedmen's Bureau and the executive and other documentary reports of government officials, especially in the War and Treasury Department, which gave the historians the only groundwork upon which he can build a real and truthful picture. There are certain historians who have not tried deliberately to falsify the picture. Southern whites like Francis Butler, Lay, and Susan Smedes. Northern historians like McPherson, Oberholzer, and Nicolay and Hay. I can't say their names right. There are foreign travelers like Sir George Campbell, George's Clemencia, and Robert Sumer. There are the personal remnants of Augustus Beard, George Julian, George F. Harrer, Carl Schurz, and John Sherman. They are the individuals' works of Edward McPherson and the more recent studies of Paul Hayworth, A. Taylor, and Charles Wesley. Bale simply does not take black people into account in the critical years of 1866. Who's in here? No, you. Certain monographs deserve all praise, like those of Hendricks and Pierce, and the works. Oh my gosh! Stop, eyes. And the work of Flack is prejudiced but built on study. The defense of the carpetbag regime by Torgey and Allen, Power, Clayton, Heldon, and Warmoth were worthy anecdotes of certain writers. The lives of Stevens and Sumner were revealed even when slightly apologetic because of black people, while Andrew Johnson is beginning to suffer from writers who are trying to prove how seldom he got drunk and think that that's important. It will be noted that for my authority in this work, I have depended very largely upon secondary material, upon state histories of Reconstruction, written with the main of those who were convinced before they began to write that black people was incapable of government or of becoming a constituent part of the civilized state. The fairness of these histories have not tried to conceal facts. In other cases, the black man has been largely ignored, while in still others, he has been traduced and ridiculed. If I had had time and money and opportunity to go back to the original sources in all cases, there can be no doubt that the weight of this work would have been vastly strengthened. And as I firmly believe, the case of black people more convincingly set forth. Various volumes of papers of great libraries, like the Johnson papers in the Liberty of Congress, the Sumner manuscript at Harvard, and Schultz correspondence, and Wells paper, and Chase's papers, and Fudeson's and Greeley's collection, and McGluck's and McPherson, Sherman, Stevens, and Trimble's papers, almost have much a great interest to the historians of the American black person. I have not had time nor opportunity to examine these, and most of those who have examined them had little interest in black folk. Black people have done some excellent work in their own histories and defense. It suffers, of course, from the natural partisanship and the desires to prove a case in the face of the choir of unfair attacks. Its best works also suffers from the fact that black people with difficulty reach an audience. But this is also true in such white writers as Saggs and Bancroft, who could not get first-class publishers because they were saying something that the nation did not like. Black historians began with autobiographies and reminiscence. The old historians were George W. Williams and Joseph T. Wilson. The new school of historians is led by Carter J. Woodson, and I have been greatly helped by unpublished theses of 4 of the youngest black students. It is most unfortunate that while many young white Southerners can get funds to attack and ridicule black people and his friends, it is almost impossible for first-class black students to get a chance to research or to get finished work in print. I write then in the field devastated by the passions and beliefs. Naturally, as a black person, I cannot do this writing without believing the essential humanity of black people and their ability to be educated and to do the work of the modern world, to take their place as equal citizens with others. I cannot for a moment subscribe that to bizarre doctrines of race that makes most men inferior to a few, but to, as a student of science, I want to be fair, objective and judicial, to let no sneering of memory by intolerable insults and cruelty make me fail to sympathize with human frailties and contradictions in the internal paradox of good and evil. But armed and warned by all this and fortified by long studies of the facts, I stand at the end of this writing literally aghast at what American historians have done to this field. This is the object of writing the history of Reconstruction. What is the object of writing the history of Reconstruction? It is to wipe out the disgrace of a people which fought to make slaves of black people. It is to show that the North had higher motives than free and black men. It is to prove that black people were black angels. No, it is simply to establish the truth in which right in the future may be built. We shall never have a science of history until we have in our colleges men who regard the truth as more important than the defense of the white race, and who will not deliberately encourage students to gather thesis materials in order to support a prejudice or buttress a lie. 3/4 of the testimony against black people in Reconstruction is on the unsupported evidence of men who hated and despised black people and regarded it as loyalty to blood, patriotism to the country, and faithful tribute to the fathers to lie, steal, or kill in order to discredit these black folk. This may be a natural result when a people have been humbled and impoverished and degraded in their own life. But what is inconceivable is that another generation and another group should regard this testimony as scientific truth when it is contradicted by the logic and by facts. This chapter, therefore, which is logic, should be a survey of books and sources, becomes a sheer necessity and arrangement of American historians, and an indictment of their ideals. With a determination unparalleled is in science, the mass of American writers have started out so to distort the facts of the greatest critical period of American history, as to prove right wrong, and wrong right. I am not familiar enough with the vast field of human history to pronounce on the relative guilt that these and historians and other times and fields, but I do say that if the history of the past has been written in the same fashion, it is useless as science and misleading as ethics. It simply shows that with sufficient general agreement, the determination among the dominant classes, the truth of history may be utterly distorted and contradicted and changed to any convenient fairy tale that the master of men wish. I cannot believe that any unbiased mind with an ideal of truth and of scientific judgment can read the plain, authentic facts of our history during 1860 to 1880 and come to the conclusion essentially different from mine. And yet I stand virtually alone in this interpretation, so much so that the very cogency of my facts would make me hesitate. Did I not seem to see plain reasons? Subtract from Burgess his belief that only white people can rule, and he is an essentially agreement with me. Remember that Rhodes was an uneducated moneymaker who hired clerks to find the facts which he needed to support his thesis, and one is convinced that the same labor and expenses could easily produce quite opposite results. One fact, and one alone, explains the attitude of such recent writers towards Reconstruction. They cannot conceive black people as men. In their minds, the word black, which they use the N-word with the O at the end, connotes inferiority and unintelligent, lightened only by unreasoning garrity and humor. Suppose the slave of 1860s had been white folk. Stevens would have been a great statesman, Sumner a great Democrat, and Schultz a keen prophet in the mighty revolution of rising humanity. Ignorance and poverty would easily have been explained by history, and the demand for land and the franchise would have been justified as the birthright of natural freemen. But Burgess was a slaveholder, Dunning a copperhead, and Rhodes an exploiter of wage labor. Not one of them, apparently, ever met an educated black person of force and ability. Around such impressive thinkers gathered the young post-war students from the South. They had been born and reared in the bitterest period of Southern race hatred, fear, and contempt. Their instinctive reactions were confirmed and encouraged in the best of American universities. Their scholarships, when it regarded black men, became deaf, not able to talk, and blind. The clearest evidence of black ability, work, honesty, patience, learning and efficiency became distorted into cunning, brute toil, shrewd evasions, cowardice, intimidation, and unintelligent effort to transcend nature's law. For those 7 mystic years between Johnson swing around the circle and the Panic of 1873, a majority of thinking Americans in the North believed in the equal manhood of black folk. They acted accordingly with a clear-cut decisiveness and thorough logic, utterly incomprehensible to the day like ours, which does not share this human faith. And to Southern whites, this period can only be explained by deliberate vengeance and hate. The Panic of 1873 brought sudden disillusions in business enterprises, economic organization, religious belief, and political standards. A flood of appeal from the white South reinforced this reaction. Appeal with no longer the arrogant bluster of slave oligarchy, but a simply moving annuals and the plight of the conquered people. The resulting emotion of intellectual rebound of the nation made it clear and conceivable. And in 1876, that 10 years earlier, most men had believed in human equality, assuming there as axiomatic the endless, remember this one? You looked up axiomatic. The endless inferiority of the black race. These newer historians, mostly Southerners, some Northerners who deeply sympathize with the South, misinterpret, distort, even deliberately ignore any fact that challenged contradicted this assumption. If black people was admittedly subhuman, what need to waste the time to delving into his Reconstruction history? Consequently, historians of Reconstructions, with a few exceptions, ignore black people as completely as possible, leaving the readers to wonder why an element apparently so insignificant filled the whole Southern picture at the time. The only real excuse for this attitude is loyalty to a lost cause, reverence for a brave father and suffering mom and sister, and fidelity to the ideas of a clan and class. But in propaganda against black people since emancipation in this land, we face one of the most stupendous efforts the world ever saw to discredit human beings on efforts involving universities, history, science, social life, and religion. The most significant drama in this last 1,000 years of human history is the transportation of 10 million human beings out of the dark beauty of their mother continent into the newfound El Dorado of the West. They descended into hell, and in the 3rd century they rose from the dead in the finest efforts to achieve democracy for the working millions, which this world has ever seen. It was a tragedy that the Bagard of Greek. It was an upheaval of humanity like the Reformation of the French Revolution. Yet we are blind and led by the blind. We discern in it no part of our labor movement, no part of our individual triumph, no part of our religious experience. Before they use the D word, eyes, so unintelligent eyes, 10 generations of 10 million children. It has made mockery and of the spit upon, a degradation of the eternal mother, a sneer at human effort, with an aspiration of an art deliberately and elaborately distorted. And why? Because in the day when the human mind aspired to a science of human action, a history of psychology, of the mighty efforts of the mightiest century, we fell under the leadership of those who would compromise with truth in the past in order to make peace in the present and guide policies in the future. One reads the truer, deeper facts of Reconstruction with a great despair. It is at once so simple and human, and yet so futile. There is no villain, no unintelligent, no saint. There is just men who crave ease and power, men who know what the want and hunger, men who have crawled. They all dream and strive with ecstasy of fear and strain, of effort, bulked of hope and hate. Yet the rich Yet the rich world is wide enough for all, wants all, needs all. So slight a gesture, a word, might set the strife in order, not with full content, but with growing dawn and of fulfillment. Sorry, buddy. Instead, roars and crash of hell, and after its whirlwind, a teacher sits in academic halls, learned in the traditions of its elms, of its elders. He looks into the upturned face of youth, and in him, youth sees the gowning shape of wisdom and hears the voice of God. Cynically, he sneers at quote, I'm not saying that word, that's a bad word for, I think, for Asian people, and N-words. He says that the nation, quote, has changed its views in regards to the political relations of race and has at last virtually accepted the ideas of the South upon that subject. The white men of the South need now have no further fear that the Republican Party or Republican administrators will never again give themselves over to the vain imagination of the political equality of man. Immediately in Africa, a black back runs red with the blood of the lash. In India, a brown girl is great. In China, a blank starves. It's just another bad word for Chinese person. In Alabama, 7, they use the opposite of light, are more than lynched. While in London, the white limbs of a prostitute are hung with jewels and silk. Flames of jealousy, murder sweep the earth, while brains of little children smear the halls. This is education in the 19th century and the 35th year of of Christ. This is modern and exact social science. This is the university course in history 12, set down by the Stantius Academicus. Ad qua he, oh my gosh, this is all in different languages. Sorry, I can't do that. In Babylon, dark Babylon. This is a poem, everybody. In Babylon, dark Babylon, who take the wage of shame, the scribe and singers, one by one, what that toil for gold and fame, they grovel to their masters. Mood, the blood upon the pen assigns their soul to servitude. Yea, the soul of men. That's George Stearlings. In the marketplace, from select poems used for permission of, okay. And, ooh, that's the end of that chapter. This might be it. That's it. I don't know. Hold on. I think that's it. I think we're done. I don't see anything else. Oh, no, government reports. Yep, that's done. We have finished the book, everybody. Let's go ahead and talk about what we just read. And then we'll pick a book that we'll read next. Who wants to go first?
I guess I'll go.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say I have 2 takeaways from what I listened to.
Mm-hmm.
This book, I mean, after listening to the very little portion of this book, it just draws me closer more and more to Maoism.
Mm-hmm.
So I should probably tell you this. For the time I've been gone out of TikTok, I've been drawing really close to Maoism lately. because I've been just reading history and just leaving theory aside for a little bit. But now that I'm here, there was a part where the author said that a lot of the anti-black sentiment is based on trying to prove the wrong to be right and the right to be wrong. Do you remember that part?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. To me, that just it puts me in a spot where, it makes it impossible for me to deny how important Maoism is. But it also draws me to the conclusion that is the importance of Maoism, or I would say specifically building the mass line, is it that new of is its necessity that new of a thing or not? Because back then in the Reconstruction era, there was technically no such a thing as Maoism, but it doesn't mean that there wasn't a need for building a mass line. And I think that there's like this war in regards of knowledge, and I think that's why a lot of white supremacists, as like the book was describing as you were reading, that's what they take advantage of. They take advantage of the fact that they ruin the opportunities for the black community to build a mass line, and then with that, they take advantage of the situation to later on affect their material conditions.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and the second part, I looked it up. Yeah, Burgess, even libertyfund.org admits that Burgess was heavily influenced by Arthur de Gobineau. I just wanted to put that out there, that I looked it up.
Yeah. Thank you for looking it up. Thank you for that.
Yeah, it was saying that all of his views on the Reconstruction era were based on the essay, The Inequality of the Human Races. And so his whole conclusion was that only the Germanic civilizations will be able to thrive in society.
Which is not true.
Exactly.
Because race is a social construct made up to subjugate people that are non-white. It's what it's always been used for.
That's true. And also, do you remember earlier today when you were reading where the author mentioned that a lot of those opportunities that the black community was stripped of when it comes to organization is because they were sabotaged by the white agenda? Mm-hmm. And not only in the Reconstruction era, but the COINTELPRO. Do you remember what they did with the breakfast program with the Black Panthers?
Yeah.
The breakfast program was going great until all of them decided to fucking urinate on the bread.
Oof. Yeah, I can understand that. Yep, black people have always been enslaved here in the United States. It has not changed. It's just changed its forms. Content is still the same. The form is different.
Yeah.
So. Okay.
That's why they. Oh, sorry.
No, go finish. Then we'll go to Joe next.
I was just gonna say that's why the prison industry exists.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Joe.
Oh, Joe.
Joe, would you like to say something? Are you coming up? What happened? Why isn't Joe up here yet? There they are. Holy crap.
Let me know.
Thought I accepted them.
Oh my God. Up? I don't know why it kicked me. That's weird.
Yeah. What's up? What'd you like to say?
I was going to say it was a really good reading. I really enjoyed learning what I learned because I like to learn. I this is my second book on Reconstruction, and this one was more thorough than the last one. And so, reading all the white people's prejudiced and racial thoughts was miserable, and realizing that it hasn't changed at all since Reconstruction in the South was definitely sad.
Yeah, I agree. I think the thing is too is that like this proves like how we are where we are right now, and due to the lack of honesty in our history has kept the same thing going. Because we still have slavery in the United States, we still have G-side, we still have cultural erasure, we still have all these things, femicide and stuff like that. And what the state does is they put a bow on our history and say, yeah, we did this, but you know what? We saved them from that, you know, and we did all these things for them. And it's not true at all. Not true one bit, you know?
So you do realize that those liberal talking points of like, oh, well, that was in the past and that was very bad. Or, you know that you do realize that all of those liberal talking points where they say, you know what, we helped them out of it. It still originates from the same, and I'm sorry that I'm repeating this too much, but I just think that the reason why I'm repeating it so often, Communist and Joe, is because I don't think that the world realizes that most of the prejudices that the anti-black prejudices that not only exist in Turtle Island but all over the world come from the ideology of this one fucking French guy who just decided to shit that out there. And it's that concept of, oh well, we saved black people because they cannot save themselves to save their lives. And that's just a talking point that it is supposed to serve like as a dog whistle of like, oh well, they're just weak and incapable, so we have to come in and help and save them from everything. When that's just not fucking true. It's kind of like, you know, I'm gonna punch you in the face and then I'm gonna give you a band-aid kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, oh my god, dude. So I think what we're gonna do next, I'll show you the thing. Unless someone wants to go ahead again. Do you want to go again, Joe, or are you good?
I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, let me go look up this book real quick. I'm gonna get it real quick. Just taking forever. As soon as I get it downloaded to where I want to get it downloaded, then I'll go look it up on that. I'll go, hold on a second, let me look for it. Where are you? Wonder what kind of shit I'll get into this with this book. Oh my god. Hold on, I gotta wait. Done. Back up. What are you doing? Okay, France Fanon psychology. The psychology of a person. Let me go get the book title real quick.
Nice to see you, Joe, by the way. And everyone else too.
Yes, Finn, it's nice to see you back. Nancy Debunker, you're wasting your time. I've read your profile. You've only got one follower. You're not coming up. And we know that's a lie. Because Karl Marx went to Africa. Did you know that? Not necessarily a troll account. Go get on your main, come back and show some balls in your face, and then maybe I'll debate you.
Yahtzee debunker. Oh, he's a Yahtzee debunker. He wants to debunk
Yahtzee Debunker has 3 followers, 20 following, and it says, I argue with leftist communists who worship Karl Marx.
Okay.
What does the W word mean on their description? Because it doesn't sound like a good word to me.
It's probably a slur.
Okay. Oh,
This is what I was
I
going to do
figured it
next.
out.
This is the book I was going to do next. Oh my God, stop. That's the book I was going to do next.
Alright, we'll make sure to get it tagged and everything in the Discord.
Yeah, that'd be a good book to read. Read his letters to Engels on 1862. Emotional cows aren't nobody. What are you talking about? I'm not scared. Are you guys all scared? I'm not scared. Are you scared?
He won't even come
What
on his
should I be
face.
scared of?
Like, he won't
Find
show
out.
his face. He's a chicken
Find
shit.
out.
And he wants to threaten people. Why not?
Karl Marx
I'll
hated
tell you why
niggers. Read his
not.
letters to Engels
Oh
on
my
July
God,
30th.
you just cursed.
This is why I told you why not. You don't let a troll up in your live.
Don't yell at me, please. Don't yell at me, please.
Okay. Let's just all come down for a moment. Let's take a deep breath.
Why'd you?
That was a
You.
Because
That
I
was a
just
piece.
said no, and you counteracted me and brought him up anyways.
Because I wanted to see.
That he was a troll?
Oh my God, Joe, please, not on live. Please don't argue with me on live, please. Oh my God. Anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and close it down. All right. Does anybody else have anything before I close it down?
just thank you for this. I
No worries.
appreciate it.
This book is in the thing, okay?
Yeah, I'll be on the lookout. Only if I had access to my to the internet, so I could use it on my computer. Then